Hello, Packers fans. Welcome to the Green 19 podcast. My name is JR Radcliffe, and I'm once again joined by PackersNews.com writers Ryan Wood and Tom Silverstein as we settle in to discuss the Packers' pivotal battle Sunday against the Chicago Bears. Playoff berth on the line with a win. Packers will be 9-8, headed to face either Detroit, Dallas, or Philadelphia in the wild card round of the NFC playoffs. Some very notable players trending toward a return from injury, which we'll talk about. Jaire Alexander spoke to the media on Wednesday for the first time since his one-game suspension, so we'll discuss that. Not to mention, pretty good quarterback matchup with a lot of storylines there. But first, I guess the big picture, just looking at this opponent, and I'll start with you, Ryan. The Bears, they are not the same team that Green Bay dismantled 38-20 at the start of the season. They've gone 5-3 in their last 8 games. Those 3 losses were all by 1 score. So Ryan, I guess from what you know about this team, what's changed? What makes them a threat, and why should they be concerned? Because I do think they should be a little bit concerned.
Yeah, Montez Sweat changed some things, and it's interesting. The Pro Bowl rosters came out last night, and the Bears have 2 Pro Bowlers, Montez Sweat and Jalen Johnson, and the Packers have not. So there's talent on that side of the ball. As it usually goes in this league, the difference has been the quarterback play this season. Jordan Love's been much better than Justin Fields, but that's a formidable Bears defense. I don't know exactly what to make of it, though, because when you look at how this Bears defense has played, they've given up 33 points their last 2 weeks. The week before they lost the Browns, they only gave up 20. They've been playing well lately, but none of those 3 teams, the Browns, the Cardinals, the Falcons, are good offenses with good quarterbacks. Joe Flacco's he's played well enough with that Browns defense, but he's not Jordan Love. The week before that Cleveland game, they gave up 28 against the last good offense they played, the Lions. So I'll be very curious to see how much there is to it. On one hand, the Bears defense has been playing pretty well. On the other hand, they haven't seen an offense like what this Packers offense is right now in a while. So that'll be interesting to me.
Bears come in with some clarity. They know they're getting the number 1 pick in the draft thanks to Carolina's finish, thanks to this trade that is incredible. I don't know if people realize how great this trade was for the Chicago Bears, just scratching the surface with this number 1 pick. But they also, they're also going to want to mess things up for the Green Bay Packers. They know they can't make the playoffs. It's eerily similar to what they had last year, the Packers with the Lions. Once that game started, they knew they weren't going to the playoffs, but the team playing for pride played better. So Tom, because quarterback play, like Ryan said, is a big deal. I know you wrote about kind of a little bit of a comparison at PackersNews.com, looking at Jordan Love, looking at Justin Fields, kind of discussing, what it would take to be kind of the best quarterback in the division, basically. And I think Fields' play this year is a little, I don't know, controversial is probably the wrong word, but there are some people who say he really did emerge as a franchise quarterback. There are others who look at him and say they're probably going to have to take a quarterback with the number 1 pick, and Fields would basically be on his way out. So I don't know what to make of him. He gives people problems with his legs, but how do you evaluate him? Do you think he is a dangerous difference maker, or do you think he can even be seen as a liability for the Chicago Bears? How do you evaluate him?
I think he's got some talents that are difficult to defend. I think he's got a little bit of the Lamar Jackson, you better keep him in the pocket kind of thing. He's got, some daring. He's got some ability to throw the ball. He's not Lamar Jackson in that regard. But sort of, the point of my column was that, the Packers have kind of owned the division as far as quarterbacks have gone. And Jordan Love is kind of pointing in that direction. However, they have the number 1 pick in the draft, and they might have the best quarterback in the division very soon if they take Caleb Williams or the kid from North Carolina. So it's kind of like up in the air. And the other reason I sort of addressed it was because the Bears have to make a decision on that. Are they going to, use that pick to take a quarterback and then get rid of Justin Fields? Don't forget, they gave up quite a bit to move up to get Justin Fields from number 20 to number 12. So I just thought it was kind of an interesting thing. And his play Sunday could make a difference in their decision. Maybe if they're able to knock off the Packers and he has this unbelievable game it certainly will make their decision harder. I think most, I talked to a couple scouts about it, and most of them thought it was a no-brainer that they would take a quarterback, that Caleb Williams or Marcus May would be
Drake May, yeah.
Would be the guy that they take. And that could change a lot within the division too. What changed when the Bengals took Joe Burrow? Even Trevor Lawrence has been a difference maker. And so I think it's kind of an interesting thing looking forward. But as far as defending Justin Fields this week, I think they just have to keep him from running the ball. They just got to keep him in the pocket and figure out how to do that. And I know I saw one play last week where it looked like he was down and he somehow spun out of it, and it was pretty impressive. So I think they're going to have to be a very disciplined team against him.
Spoon, the point that you just made, I'm curious what both of you guys think on this, because I've been wondering, not to get too lost in the weeds on the Bears, but it does impact the division. I've been wondering, especially if you're in the division and you see what's happened with the Packers the last two times they've changed quarterbacks, and how unique that's been, where you draft a quarterback when you already have the guy and you give him 3 years to marinate, and then you let him take over, which is counter to everything that every other way that this league operates, right? The usual standard protocol is you draft that first round quarterback, you throw him into the deep end, sink or swim. A lot of guys sink. So every once in a while you get a guy that swims, but a lot of guys sink and then you just do it again. If I'm the Bears, I don't know if I don't draft a quarterback number one and keep Justin Fields. And at the very worst case scenario, you got a guy that can play this season in Justin Fields, and you don't have to put a Caleb Williams in the deep end right away. You can let him develop, especially when you might be changing head coaches. With Matt Eberflus this offseason, you might be going to a new offensive head coach, which means a new scheme, a new system. Give the new guy a year to kind of learn and develop in this league, to figure some things out. And then if Justin Fields next year becomes Justin Fields, well, what's good? You got two potentially great quarterbacks, because this is a franchise that has to figure out that position and never has. So I just don't know why it's an either or. Am I crazy to think that?
Well, a little bit in that it's a difference when you're taking the 24th pick in the draft and when you're taking the first pick in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Caleb Williams is probably ready to come and play. I mean, he's so far above, probably anything that's come out of college since Joe Burrow. Now, he still has to prove it. But I think, there aren't many scouts who are doubtful about him. And May has just come on really strong. So I don't know if you're taking him first, whether you want to waste any time putting him on the field. It could be a year thing. Fields is up in his still on his rookie contract, so you could afford it. I just don't know if you want to delay putting it in the hands of someone like a Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence. Like, teams seem to want to put that guy in there when he's taken that high because of his talent and because he's going to be the future of the franchise.
Yeah, I get it's unorthodox. You could have thought the same with Mitch Trubisky at number 2 overall, right? When you're taking a quarterback number 2, you expect him to be the guy, and they took Mitch Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes, which Bears fans know very well. Patrick Mahomes got most of his first season to sit, and to develop. Mitch Trubisky right away. He's in the deep end, and that was as big of a draft blunder in the history of the NFL draft. I'm the Bears, and I just screwed up that decision. I haven't had a franchise quarterback in decades. I don't know if I'm just throwing everything into that position, okay, and just figure something out. Kind of like what the Seattle Seahawks did when they signed Matt Flynn and they drafted Russell Wilson in the 3rd round. And okay, we're just going to we're going to do everything we can here. We're going to sign a guy, draft a guy. Just you got to get that right, because if they don't get that right, history's just going to keep repeating itself, and the Packers are going to own the NFC North in perpetuity, and the Bears are not going to have a quarterback in perpetuity. I don't know. It's unorthodox, but I just wonder.
Bears are in this position because of a trade last year where they had the number 1 pick. They got DJ Moore out of it, who arguably their best player. We'll have to talk a little more about him. Plus additional draft compensation, a second rounder in 2025, as well as the first rounder in 2024. And they kind of hit on a couple of the picks that they got here in this year's draft. Darnell Wright on the offensive line, Tyreek Stevenson, who was NFC Defensive Player of the Week, had a couple interceptions. He'll be someone the Packers are dealing with, the rookie on Sunday. Justin Fields has never beaten the Packers 0-5 as a starter. Earlier this year, he threw for, I think it was 216 yards in week 1, did throw a pick 6 to Quay Walker. And Ryan, I wanted to ask about defending him a little bit more. Quay Walker, presumably the linebackers will be a big deal. And I know Devondre Campbell is practicing this week, so one would assume he'll be back. And Quay Walker, I would assume, is the guy kind of just in charge of handling Justin Fields. Is it as simple as that, would you say, or is there more to it?
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating aspect of this game, as Boone just alluded to. You know, the one way we don't know anything about the Packers defense. We don't know what's going to show up. They showed up great last week, 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before. They did not. They showed up great against Patrick Mahomes and Jared Goff. They gave up 200 rushing yards to the Pittsburgh Steelers. We have no idea what this defense is going to do from a week-to-week basis. The one way that they can absolutely get wrecked is if they don't contain Justin Fields. If they let Justin Fields take this game over with his legs, they won't be going to the playoffs. That's how important this is. So, yeah, I mean, Quay Walker's got to be a quarterback spy, and it's a fine balance with this defensive front, how to rush him, because the strength that we do know with this Packers defense is their depth of pass rush. I mean, that is what they've done well pretty much throughout the season. You take the Giants game out of the equation, every other game, they've had really a wealth of deep pass rushing. But you can't just pin your ears back against Justin Fields. You got to rush him to contain. You want to affect him as a passer, but you can't do that at the absence of gap integrity and just letting him run all over the place. That's a fine balance. And how they do that, and I think that Quay Walker being a spy is at the forefront of that. How they do that in a lot of ways, it'll dictate what happens Sunday.
Fields ran 9 times for 59 yards in week 1. It's one of his better rushing games of the year. And, one of the explanations I saw was if they are deciding they're going to move on, they might be more willing to just let him run whenever he wants because, like before the concerns were about his long-term health. Well, if he's not part of the long-term plan, the Bears maybe could just let him do what he wants. And in terms of the running game, and that could be a big deal. We know the Packers have had their struggles with rushing quarterbacks in the past. Tom, another aspect of the defense is Jaire Alexander. I just mentioned DJ Moore, who I personally think is just a slight notch below Justin Jefferson. At least this year he is. He's having a tremendous year. I don't know if people realize how good he's been. And we talked a little bit last week about Jaire's responsibilities coming back into the fray after this 1-game suspension. How much will he be dealing with DJ Moore? But I want to ask about Jaire speaking to the media on Wednesday. It was very subdued, very different Jaire Alexander than we normally are used to. There wasn't a lot of swag. It was pretty short answers, but he answered every question, contrite seemingly. So give me your impression of that whole situation of what he said, if anything struck you, and then where you think he is, where he fits right now with this organization.
Well, I sort of walked out of that interview like I have walked out of every Jaire Alexander interview going, what?
Okay.
Like, what are you trying to say? Or, what am I supposed to take away from this? I agree. He seemed contrite. But he, it wasn't, he didn't pour his emotions out, or he didn't really lay out any of what the issue was, or a mea culpa for running out and doing the coin flip thing, or kind of leaving his team in the lurch by getting suspended. I just kind of walked out of it going, okay, you're back, and you seem like you regret being suspended because you got suspended. But I didn't really come out much more out of that. I don't doubt that he's going to come out and he's going to play. I don't think he's the kind of guy who won't play hard and won't give his best. It's just it just is kind of a weird deal, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised that's the way it went.
I would imagine, Ryan, that we will see him a lot on DJ Moore. I mean, again, I think DJ Moore is vital to their success, and even if Fields is running all day, that's a really, really tough weapon, a really, really talented guy. I don't know if you expect it to be to be more complicated than that Alexander would get the bulk of the work on Moore's side of the field.
Well, I'll say this, if, and it's a big if, it's a capital IF, but if Jaire Alexander comes back off of this suspension motivated and driven and, most importantly, focused, that's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous weapon for the Packers because a focused, driven Jaire Alexander, it's a heck of a thing. There's a reason why he was paid as a top cornerback in this league. We haven't seen it in a while, but we did see it last year against Justin Jefferson at Lambeau Field. We saw it against the Rams. I know that they had Brett Rippon, but he had a heck of a game. Jaire Alexander is still one of the few cornerbacks in this league that can shut down half the field. He can do that. It hasn't been every week, but just because it hasn't been every week doesn't mean it's not there. And so if he comes off of this suspension focused and motivated, that's the good part of the suspension. The risk in the suspension was that you didn't have him in Minnesota against Justin Jefferson in a game that was essentially a playoff game that if you lose, it ends your season. But they were able to win that game without him. And so the benefit is now, okay, get his head on straight, get him focused, get him concentrated, and then put him on the field and shut down half the field. I think that'll be how he comes off. And I don't know if you guys have an opinion, but I think it'd be very interesting, the whole, do they make him a captain or not this week? I think I can see it going either way. I'm not saying one way or the other, but I think it's worth consideration. It'd be very interesting to see what Matt LaFleur does there.
What did you take from his what did you take away from standing there? You watched the whole thing too. What did you take away?
I thought it was entirely different than how we've seen Jaire Alexander all season. The swag was gone. This is a guy before the Giants game. He started an interview saying, "Let the lies begin." And I get that we in the media for players, we're like the equivalent of doing the dishes. They don't want to talk to me. They just rather, put their head down and focus on the ball, right? But it's important because this is a business. It's not a game. It's a business. And that is the public driving force of this business, is communicating, connecting publicly with fans. We're the conduit that does that. So when you are goofing around, when you're saying, let the lies begin, that undercuts all your credibility. And that's important to have as a professional. You need to have credibility as a professional. So he took it seriously. He even said himself, what are we going to notice that he was asked, what are we going to notice that's different? He said, I'm probably going to be more serious in these interviews. That's a good thing. And it's a small thing because ultimately, if he's shutting down half the field every week, it doesn't matter how he conducts himself in the interview, because how he is on the field is what is most important. But if he's not, you got to back that up, and he hasn't backed that up. So for him to recognize that it's a strong positive sign. We just don't know if that'll continue or not, right? And ultimately, it's on how he plays. But I thought he was different, and that's not a bad thing.
I don't know if people realize how good the Bears are at stopping the run. They're number one in the league right now, allowing 84 yards a game. So I did think it was interesting or very helpful that the Packers seem to be getting all their pass catchers back. The passing game seems to be getting a shot in the arm. We've talked about Luke Musgrave getting closer to a return. All the receivers seem to be on the field healthy. Jaden Reed after last week, Dontavian Wicks, who missed last week. It looks like Christian Watson will be back. So I think they're going to be at full strength in the passing game. Now, this Bears team has also been very good taking the ball away. We could talk about the level of competition in the quarterbacks they've played, but past 10 games, they've got 18 takeaways, and a lot of those are interceptions. So Tom, just from a health perspective, what really is jumping out? I know they're still missing some people, Preston Smith, for example, on the defensive side of the ball, but I was encouraged. Even though the names, there's a million names on that injury report, it seems like the right guys that are going to help this offense anyway are trending towards playing. So what are your takeaways from where they are health-wise?
Well, I will just make one point that, it doesn't, getting interceptions. I think they lead the league in interceptions. I think they got like 22 interceptions. And it doesn't matter what quarterback you play, as the Packers have shown, they can't pick off the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. They finally got one against Jalen Hall. I think they're an aggressive style of defense, and I think and that sort of leads into the health thing. So if I'm Matt LaFleur, I'm struggling with how much do I use Luke Musgrave and Christian Watson. Yeah, they're big parts of this offense. But just because they're back now after how many weeks, being more than a month, I don't know who they are exactly. And right now, if I'm LaFleur, I'm like, well, Jalen Reed, I know. Wicks was really hot till he got hurt last week. Bo Melton has been on fire. I would really gradually work in Christian Watson and Luke Musgrave, because I would not center my game plan around them just because they're back. And once again, if Aaron Jones remains healthy, and I know he banged up his knee, but he was practicing. AJ Dillon was banged up, so we'll see with him. But I'm a little leery about saying, okay, their offense is back. They got so many options, because just coming back from injury is not a easy thing. I think it's probably good for them that they're back this week in case they go to the playoffs.
Sure.
They'll be better for it next week.
Ryan, if Preston Smith is unavailable, I mean, he's had a really great year for somebody at this stage in his career. How big of a deal is that if the Packers don't have him?
First of all, I think he will be available. He finished the Minnesota game. That's usually a good sign. He's I think the oldest guy in the locker room, so he's not a guy that needs to practice this week to play. And you're right. He's had a solid year, and he's been really good the last two games. 7 quarterback hits the last 2 games. He's had a strip sack, which was a pivotal moment in that Vikings game where the Packers were able to capitalize and get another touchdown, 23-3 lead for the half. And part of it with Preston Smith, when you look, he's at 695 snaps this year. Last year he played 825. They've basically been able to taper off. This is guys available every week, but they've been able to taper off his snap count by a full game. And at this stage in his career, there's something to be said about less is more. By having a full game less in snaps, he's got 8 sacks, a half sack less than last year. He's got 21 quarterback hits, one more quarterback hit than he had all of last year. There's still a game to play. So what does that mean? It means that they have depth. They're able to do that. They've had almost 400 snaps from Lucas Van Ness, who's come on and looks like, very similar to Rashawn Gary's rookie year. Kingsley Enagbare is a guy that can get you pass rush. They have other options. So the depth that they do have on the edge makes his presence less important than maybe a year ago when they didn't have that kind of depth. But I would imagine that he does play, and it's a good thing because he's been on a torrid pace these past 2 games.
Yeah, what I was going to say too, to add on to that is his play has been really critical because I think Rashawn Gary's starting to hit kind of a wall. People forget that he's coming back from an ACL that he tore at mid-season or November. It's only been like 13 months, something like that. And he put everything into that rehab, and I just don't see quite the explosiveness, and I see them paring back a little bit on his snaps. So I think it's been crucial that Preston Smith has come through the way he has, because Gary's just been a smidge less impactful than he had been, and Preston Smith seems like he's getting better with every game. And in terms of him missing games, the guy doesn't miss games, and he rarely misses practices. So I don't know. I would bank that he would be in the game unless they, amputate his ankle or something like that.
Real quick, Spoon, to your point about Rashawn Gary hitting the wall, Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith have both played 16 games this year. Rashawn Gary has 150 fewer snaps. You know, they are still – it's easy to forget. They are still managing this knee injury. It's his first year back. He's only at 552 snaps, playing the same number of games. Next year would be when you expect Rashawn Gary at full force.
Rashawn Gary making the most of his snaps. He's a Pro Bowl alternate, as you mentioned, first alternate, but the only first alternate. They've got a few other guys who are also alternates, but no Pro Bowl picks, as you mentioned. And that doesn't necessarily like hit me as wrong or incorrect. I guess it feels right, but for me, Tom, it underscores that the fact that they're in position to make the playoffs with this team is really, really something. I mean, the best days are absolutely ahead of them, and here they are on the cusp of the playoffs if they can beat this Bears team. And some of that is because it's 7 teams, you know, in the playoffs now, but they would have had a chance to be the 6th seed, you know, based on if the Rams had won or lost this week. So they put themselves in really good shape. I guess just to take a step back, if that shocks you, you know, like I know we all would have liked to have seen a 500. I think all Packers fans would have liked to have seen a 500 season coming into the season. That's what they would have said. But you go into every season, no matter who the personnel is, hoping for the best, thinking you're going to be able to make the playoffs, thinking maybe Jordan Love really is the real deal and they're going to go to the playoffs. But now that we're here and they actually are in position to go to the playoffs, if this is just a total stunner to you to be sitting here talking about this and not talking about how things are going to look in 2024 yet.
No, it's not, because I mean I actually picked them to be 10-7, and the reason I did it was because I just thought that there was enough talent, and they were far along enough in Matt LaFleur's program that they should have still be competitive even with a first-year starting quarterback. I just thought. You know, and of course, at that time, I thought Bakhtiari was going to be able to play, which, you know, was a dumb thing to think. I didn't know how injuries would hit him, but I just kind of felt like, you know, it was kind of an excuse to say, you know, they're totally building on next year. I didn't want to give them that excuse that it's all about next year, because I think they had just enough veterans and enough talent to win some games. And I got to say, after when they were 2-5, you know, I was thinking, oh man, when I you know, and when they were going into that 4-game streak where we were talking about them having 9 losses after that, you know, I was really feeling like an idiot. But I think it's kind of evened out. But all of that said, they got to win this game. They have to win this game. It's so critical in the development of Jordan Love and the development of the team as a whole. Next year is a big year, but they can still make something big happen this year. You know, it sort of reminds me of like 95 when most people weren't even born then. But
I was born.
You know,
I was young.
The Packers were, you know, they were kind of a playoff team, you know, and their draw was to go to San Francisco and play the 49ers. And they went in there and just kicked the crap out of them. And, you know, then got their butts kicked by Dallas. But it was such an important step for them to go to San Francisco and win that game. It would be a huge step for them to win and then to go somewhere, you know, Dallas or Detroit. I'm not saying they have to win, but to play a competitive game would mean a ton for them going into next year.
Spoon, I need to give you your props on that, because
on 10-5,
I remember that they were that you had them at 10-7, and when they were 2-5, I'll be honest, I thought you were crazy.
I did too. Well,
I had them at 8-9, you know, but you were. I had them at 8-9. You were much closer to being right than I was. That they, as a team, that I saw your 10-7. I'm like, that's not going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen. Not in the first year of Jordan Love, and then they're 2-5. I'm like, nah. That was way overshooting. You didn't overshoot it. I mean, you were right on the ballpark there, and that's impressive. I didn't see that coming. Now, my similarity. And I felt stupider in the first half of the season. I think I might have been the only one before the season to say that Jordan Love would have a higher passer rating this year than Aaron Rodgers did in 2008. And right now, and back in October, I was feeling real dumb. Like, oh man, I underestimated just how long this is going to take with all these young guys around him. It's not even just all him. It's just they're so young. But right now they're 93.8 to 93.8. So I'm really curious if that's going to pan out or not.
Yeah, if you had told me without Christian Watson for most of the season that he would have 30 touchdown passes,
yeah, third in the league,
I would have had you committed because that just seemed impossible.
Yeah.
Makes
me think of the 93 season, that first win in Detroit, playoff win with Brett Favre, the big pass to Sterling Sharp. That was a springboard into 94 where they got a little bit better. And then 95, like you're saying, 96, I mean, you could feel that incremental rise through the early 90s. I don't know if the NFL is in the same situation where you need that incremental rise. It feels like things accelerate much more quickly these days.
Yeah,
but,
I agree with that. I think that's true. I think it has changed. It was a 5-year plan back then.
Yeah.
You know, I think now it's got to be 2, 3. You have this small window oftentimes, and you better hit it. And that's why this game is so important.
You know, I was real curious when the Pro Bowl rosters were released. Not real curious. I did not expect Jordan Love to be a Pro Bowler, okay? Because in the NFC, you've got Purdy and Prescott. Then I thought it'd be Hurts, to be honest, over Matthew Stafford. But when you start to really look at his numbers and what he's done, and then without having Christian Watson, Aaron Jones, David Bakhtiari, so many things that he's had to overcome. Matthew Stafford's the Pro Bowler, the third Pro Bowler quarterback in the NFC. Jordan Love's passer rating's 2 points higher. He's thrown for more touchdowns, and he doesn't have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. I get the sense that it might be the last time in a while where we don't see Jordan Love maybe on a Pro Bowl list, because he was, by the end, he got himself in actual territory of being considered. He's top 5 in the conference as a quarterback right now.
Yeah, I mean, his last 7 games, his passer rating is like 109. And I think the only guy who in his last 7 games, I looked this up, who has a higher passer rating is Brock Purdy. Problem was, the Pro Bowl voting was 2 weeks ago or whatever. It's never on time with how guys are performing. So I don't know if he's a Pro Bowl quarterback. I mean, I still think Matthew Stafford has willed the Rams, even though they do have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, and Kyron Williams is a really good running back, but he sort of picked them off the mat as well. And Love's has been, he's really performed well, but man, you got to really also credit those wide receivers. I mean, they've just been phenomenal. And then you got to give LaFleur some credit too, because he's figured out ways to make that offense hum with all these rookies.
Yeah, 30 touchdown passes is really wild to me. Third in the league. Just I could not have imagined that coming. So it'll be the Packers against the Bears at Lambeau Field. 3:25 kickoff time, Central Time. We'll all be there covering the game. PackersNews.com. That's where you can see continuing coverage right up until kickoff. Tom, of course, will have his live blog per usual. The Bears have lost the last 9 meetings with the Green Bay Packers, and 14 of 15. If the Packers can make it one more, they're going to be playoff bound the following week. Thanks for tuning in to the Green 19 podcast. We'll be back with you right after the game next on Sunday, and we will chat with you then. Take care.